In Ego is the Enemy, Ryan Holiday takes readers on an expansive journey through the concept of ego, which he defines as the unhealthy belief in our own importance. This belief, though often subtle, can be one of the most corrosive forces in our lives. Ego, he argues, manifests itself in many ways. It's the voice that tells us we deserve recognition without having put in the work, that we are above others, or that the rules don't apply to us. Holiday explores how this internal force derails careers, poisons relationships, and prevents us from living with clarity and purpose. Drawing on history, philosophy, and psychology, Holiday constructs a powerful narrative designed to help us recognize ego in its many forms and take practical steps to keep it in check. The book is organized around 3 distinct stages of life: when we aspire, when we succeed, and when we experience failure. Ego, as Holiday explains, shows up differently in each of these phases, but it is always present, lurking, and waiting for an opportunity to assert itself. The key to overcoming it is awareness, humility, and discipline. Holiday's narrative provides not only insights, but also concrete tools for managing ego throughout our personal and professional journeys. The nature of ego. Ryan Holiday begins with a clear definition of ego. It is the insatiable desire to see ourselves as special, important, and superior to others. It's the illusion that our worth is tied to external achievements, titles, and recognition. Ego is that part of us that seeks constant validation and approval, and when we do not receive these things, it reacts with anger, jealousy, or self-pity. At its core, ego distorts our sense of reality, inflating our strengths while ignoring our weaknesses. As Holiday points out, ego is not only about arrogance or boasting, it can also manifest as an overwhelming need for attention, or a crippling fear of failure, because both are rooted in an obsession with self. Holiday argues that ego is something we must constantly be aware of and work to control. It is not something we defeat once and for all, but rather a persistent challenge that we must contend with throughout our lives. Ego is always looking for an opportunity to assert itself, and unless we develop the humility and discipline to counteract it, it will sabotage our efforts. What makes Holiday's work so compelling is that he does not simply present ego as a flaw of character, but as a human condition we all must face. No one is immune from its pull, and the examples he uses, ranging from historical figures to modern-day leaders, demonstrate how even the greatest among us have struggled with ego. Ego during aspiration. In the first phase of the book, Holiday focuses on ego in the stage of aspiration, when we are striving to achieve something, whether it's starting a business, pursuing a creative project, or advancing in our careers. This is a phase filled with dreams and ambitions, but also with vulnerability. It's here that ego often whispers to us that we deserve more recognition, or that success should come easily. Instead of putting in the work required to reach our goals, we sometimes let ego push us towards shortcuts, seeking the glory without the effort. Holiday emphasizes the importance of being a student in this stage, of remaining open to learning and feedback rather than assuming we already know everything. He uses the example of Genghis Khan, who spent years in obscurity before rising to power. Instead of letting ego drive him toward premature recognition, Khan patiently built alliances, studied his enemies, and cultivated his leadership skills. By the time he launched his campaign to conquer the world, he was fully prepared for the challenges ahead. This willingness to remain humble, to put in the time and effort without seeking immediate recognition, is a critical lesson in managing ego during the aspirational phase. Another key point Holiday makes is the danger of what he calls talking without doing. In the modern world, it's easy to fall into the trap of self-promotion, particularly in the age of social media. We often want to appear successful before we've actually accomplished anything. Ego drives us to seek validation through appearances rather than substance. Holiday advises against this, urging us to focus on the work itself, rather than seeking attention or accolades before we've earned them. He uses the example of successful entrepreneurs and artists who, early in their careers, avoided the spotlight and concentrated on honing their craft. For them, the process was more important than the external rewards, and this commitment to mastery ultimately led to lasting success. Holiday also warns against the dangers of comparison. When we aspire, it's easy to look around and measure ourselves against others. Ego tells us that we are falling behind, that we should be further along in our careers, or that we deserve more recognition than our peers. But this comparison is a distraction, and it can fuel resentment and envy, which only serves to poison our motivation. The antidote, Holiday argues, is to stay focused on our own path. He points out that many successful people, particularly those in creative fields, often worked in obscurity for years, content to focus on their craft rather than their status relative to others. In this phase of aspiration, the battle with ego is about resisting the temptation to focus on external validation. Instead, we must cultivate patience, humility, and a willingness to learn. These qualities, Holiday argues, are the foundation for long-term success. Ego during success. Success is often where ego becomes the most dangerous, according to Holiday. After we have achieved something, whether it's a promotion, recognition, or financial success, ego often convinces us that we've made it and that we are now untouchable. This is the phase where complacency sets in, when we start to believe that we are superior to others or that we no longer need to work as hard. Holiday notes that many successful people, after reaching a certain level of achievement, let ego erode their discipline, leading to stagnation or even decline. One of the most striking examples Holiday uses to illustrate this point is the story of Howard Hughes. Hughes was a brilliant inventor, aviator, and entrepreneur who achieved tremendous success in his early years. But as his wealth and fame grew, so did his ego. He became increasingly erratic, paranoid and isolated, convinced that he was above the rules that governed others. His life spiraled into chaos, and despite his early accomplishments, he is remembered as much for his eccentricities and downfall as for his achievements. Holiday uses Hughes's story as a cautionary tale about the dangers of allowing success to inflate our ego. To counteract ego during success, Holiday emphasizes the importance of humility and continuous learning. No matter how much we achieve, there is always more to learn and new challenges to face. The most successful people are those who remain students of their craft, even after reaching the pinnacle of their careers. They don't rest on their laurels or assume that they know everything. Instead, they stay curious, open to feedback, and focused on improvement. Holiday also discusses the importance of service. Success often brings with it the temptation to turn inward, to focus on our own desires and ambitions. But this is exactly when we should be looking outward, asking how we can use our success to serve others. He cites the example of George Marshall, the US military leader during World War II. Despite his immense contributions to the war effort, Marshall never sought personal recognition or glory. He was entirely focused on the mission and how he could best serve the country, not on how he could build his personal legacy. This selflessness, Holiday argues, is a powerful antidote to ego. When we focus on serving others, we take the focus off ourselves, and in doing so, we keep our ego in check. Another key lesson from this section of the book is the importance of maintaining discipline, even in the face of success. Holiday points out that many people, after achieving success, allow their work ethic to slip. They become comfortable and complacent, believing that they no longer need to put in the effort that got them to where they are. But this is a dangerous mindset. as it often leads to stagnation and decline. Holiday uses the example of athletes who, after reaching the top of their sport, stop training as hard, only to find that their performance suffers. The key to lasting success, he argues, is to maintain the same level of discipline and focus even after we've achieved our goals. In the success phase, ego tells us that we've earned the right to relax, to enjoy the fruits of our labour without worrying about the future. But this mindset is a trap. True success, according to Holiday, is not about reaching a specific milestone or acquiring a certain level of wealth or recognition. It's about continuous growth and improvement, about staying humble and hungry no matter how much we've achieved. Ego during failure. The final phase. Holiday explores is failure, which paradoxically can also be a breeding ground for ego. When we experience failure, whether it's a professional setback, a personal disappointment, or the collapse of a long-term goal, ego often reacts defensively. Instead of reflecting on what went wrong and how we can improve, ego drives us to make excuses, blame others, or refuse to accept responsibility for our failures. Holiday points out that failure, while painful, is one of the most important teachers we have. It offers us an opportunity to reflect, to learn, and to grow. But if we allow ego to take over, we miss out on these lessons. He uses the example of Richard Nixon, whose political career was marked by a spectacular rise and fall. After achieving great success as President of the United States, Nixon's ego led him to believe that he was above the law, which ultimately resulted in the Watergate scandal and his resignation. Rather than accepting responsibility for his actions, Nixon spent years blaming others and refusing to fully confront his own role in his downfall. This refusal to face failure honestly is a classic example of how ego can prevent us from learning and growing. Holiday emphasizes that the most successful people are those who are willing to confront failure head-on, without letting ego get in the way. They don't see failure as a reflection of their worth, but rather as an opportunity to improve. He uses the example of the boxer Jack Johnson, who, after suffering a devastating defeat early in his career, didn't let ego drive him into bitterness or excuses. Instead, Johnson went back to training, identified his weaknesses, and returned stronger than ever, eventually becoming the first African-American heavyweight champion. This ability to learn from failure, to accept it as part of the process, rather than as an indictment of our value, is crucial for long-term success. In the failure phase, Holiday argues that the key to overcoming ego is radical self-honesty. We must be willing to look at our failures with clarity and humility, asking ourselves what we can learn from them and how we can improve. Ego, however, often prevents us from doing this. It tells us that failure is something to be ashamed of, that it's a reflection of our inadequacy, and that we should hide from it or make excuses. But this mindset only serves to keep us stuck. By embracing failure, by seeing it as a necessary part of growth, we can break free from the grip of ego and continue moving forward. Practical strategies for managing ego. Throughout the book, Holiday offers practical strategies for managing ego at every stage of life. One of the most important tools he discusses is the practice of daily reflection. By regularly taking the time to reflect on our actions, motivations, and the role that ego may be playing in our decisions, we can develop greater self-awareness and humility. This reflection allows us to catch ego before it takes control, to recognize when we are acting out of a desire for validation rather than from a place of true purpose. Holiday also emphasizes the importance of seeking out mentors and feedback. Ego often tells us that we don't need help, that we have all the answers, or that criticism is an attack on our worth. But this mindset prevents us from learning and growing. The most successful people, Holiday argues, are those who actively seek out mentors who challenge them and provide honest feedback. By remaining open to advice and criticism, we keep our ego in check and ensure that we continue improving. Another key strategy Holiday recommends is cultivating a beginner's mindset. No matter how much we've achieved, we should always approach our work with the attitude of a student, eager to learn and improve. Ego often tells us that we've mastered something and that we no longer need to put in the effort to learn new things. But this mindset leads to stagnation. By remaining curious and humble, we keep ourselves open to new opportunities for growth. Finally, Holiday stresses the importance of focusing on the process rather than the outcome. Ego often drives us to seek external validation in the form of awards, recognition, or status. But this focus on outcomes can lead to disappointment, frustration, and a constant sense of inadequacy. Instead, Holiday encourages us to focus on the process, the day-to-day work of improving our craft, serving others, and striving for excellence. When we focus on the process, we free ourselves from the need for external validation and allow ourselves to find fulfillment in the work itself. Conclusion: in ego is the enemy. Ryan Holiday presents a powerful argument for why ego is one of the greatest obstacles to personal and professional growth. Whether we are just starting out, enjoying success, or grappling with failure, ego is always there, waiting to derail us. But by cultivating humility, self-awareness, and discipline, we can keep ego in check and achieve lasting success. Holiday's message is ultimately one of hope. While ego is a powerful force, it is not unbeatable. With the right mindset and strategies, we can overcome the traps of ego and lead a life of purpose, service, and fulfillment. Whether we are aspiring to achieve something great, enjoying the fruits of our labor, or dealing with the sting of failure, Holiday reminds us that the true enemy is not the external world, but the ego within us. By recognizing this, we can take control of our lives and build a legacy that is based not on the fleeting rewards of ego, but on the enduring values of humility, resilience, and integrity.